This is ContraZoom.
Where we go back and forth about film.
I'm Dakota Arsenault.
And I'm Jeff Palmer.
With the announcement of the Oscar nominations, it is time we look at the Best Picture contenders. On today's show, we are doing our last look into these candidates for this year's Oscars. I have been doing this since the first season of ContraZoom way back in 2016. Each episode, we will look at 3 to 4 of the Best Picture nominated films and the chances they have to win each of their nominations. On today's show, we'll be breaking down the odds that Frankenstein, Marty Supreme, The Secret Agent, and Train Dreams all have to win. It's pretty simple. We'll label every nomination for a movie as a frontrunner, dark horse, long shot, or just happy to be there. This episode will conclude our series on the Best Picture nominees, but over the next 2 shows, we will do our yearly Oscar draft and final predictions. So if you haven't checked out the last episode, where we talk about One Battle After Another, Sentimental Value, and Begonia with Alicia Brenner, go back and listen to it. Welcome back, Jeff. It's been a few weeks. We broke down the Oscar nominations when they came out, but we are back. You have been a long time, guest of this format. So thank you for coming back for this again.
Thank you for having me back.
Of course. When the nominations came out, we talked about how our death race was shaping up, and I believe at the time you only had 1 or 2 movies left to go, and I'm pretty sure you very swiftly rectified that. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes, I rectified that, and then I finished up all of my independent Spirit movies so I could vote on that. And today and tomorrow, as of the time of this recording, I'm currently binge watching all the Bridget Jones movies so that I can watch the last movie I have left for the BAFTA Awards tomorrow.
Wow. Okay. I've only ever seen the first Bridget Jones movie. Are you excited to delve into that world?
Well, I saw the first one and I liked it, and so I'm excited to see if I like the other ones. I assume that since there's 4, there must have been a reason to make a 4th one after a 3rd one, by which I mean at some point they must continue to be pretty good, at least. That's what I'm hoping.
Yes, I hope so for you. I know people are big fans of that franchise. So yeah, hopefully it's a worthwhile endeavor for you and not a waste of your time.
I don't know if I will report back on the podcast, but at least privately you will hear me.
I appreciate that. For me, it's now been over 4 weeks since the nominations came out, and my death race currently stands at 24 out of 35 feature films and 0 of the 15 shorts. So I still have a long ways to go. I'm hoping these next 2 weekends I can bang out most of the features, but and then I'll also have a little bit of time the week before the Oscars where I'm done the job that I'm currently working at. I'll have about 3 days off where I'm just going to spend that every day from morning to night just watching whatever movies I have left.
Well, I don't know exactly what you have left, but I know that you still have a lot of really good stuff coming up, because this was a very, very good year for Oscar nominated movies, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And even I think, and there's a few that I didn't like that I also am almost certain you will. So.
That's true. Our taste sometimes does diverge a little bit. And I'm curious because I don't think we've actually talked about these 4 movies that we're going to talk about today directly. So I have no idea where you stand on them. I will say, as a very smooth transition here, over on your podcast, Classic Movies Live, you try to do a Best Picture episode for all of the 10 nominees. Usually you get a bunch out before the nominations come out just by virtue of what your show covers, and then you try to fill in the gaps afterwards. And I recently just finished listening to your Train Dreams episode where you wax poetically about that one. So I'm glad we'll be on the same page for that, at least.
Yeah, that was a really fun episode because that was one where Pierre unfortunately couldn't make it. But we had Victoria on, who is a real life friend of mine, who is going to be a part of the Deafees this year. If people are not familiar with that, just very, very quickly, that is a parallel awards show. Well, not quite parallel, an awards show that's put on by the Oscar death racing community that happens one day before the Oscars. She's going to be my co-host this year, and so that was basically pitched to her as a the Train Dreams episode. I pitched that to her as like a chemistry test, and I think it went very, very well. She actually has I think I said she has a background in film, in media studies, which is maybe stretching the truth a little bit. I don't think it's a professional background, but she did bring a lot more um like trained media analysis experience to that than I personally have. So that was a really nice experience to get her on.
Hmm. And I'll say, at the time of your recording of that episode, she had only seen two of the 10 Best Picture nominees. So, it's kind of like Pierre is going to be right there with you, too.
Mhm.
Has she been able to watch more of the Best Picture nominees since you recorded that episode?
I believe so, but she's also been away for a vacation at least this last week, I think. So we're gonna catch up here soon, and I'm gonna ask her about her progress.
All right, awesome. So other than that episode, where do you stand now in releasing episodes? Have you covered all 10 Best Picture nominees?
We have covered 9 of the 10. I think our very next episode that we're gonna do is gonna be a little bit of a Canadian detour, and then after that, we're gonna talk about The Secret Agent, and that will be the last episode that we'll have to release to cover all the Best Picture nominees. And I think that'll still give us 1 or 2 weeks of potential episodes before the Oscars. So not sure what we'll do there, but we'll figure something out.
Nice. Well, that's very exciting and always a great series. I love being able to go back and listen to ones once they've been nominated for Oscars.
Yeah, and I'm pretty much all I do on Twitter is post links to these are my Best Picture episodes. So check it out; they are very easy to find.
Well, good. Today, as I mentioned, we will be talking about the final four films that we have not already discussed. If you want a little bit of behind the scenes knowledge of how I sort of figured these things out, I try to make each episode the same amount of nominations. So the last episode, which usually has the four films, is usually whatever four films are left, but the tally still ends up being about the same. I think between the three episodes, they all are within 1 to 2 nominations of each other. So they should theoretically be around the same length each time, but that always varies guest by guest, in case people want a little bit of behind the scenes knowledge of how I go about picking how I pair these up.
That's really good to know. I didn't know that, so I'm gonna go and tally up what the nominations were for the other ones because this one is 27 today.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I could tell you, it was 16, 8, and 4. So that's 28 for the first episode. 13, 9, and 4, which is that would be 22,
26.
26. Yeah. Yeah. See, I do a pretty good
Yeah,
job at it.
nice. Very impressive.
Thank you very much. But yeah, let's get right into this. We've got four movies to talk about today, so we got lots of ground to cover. And I say we get right into it and start with our very first film, and that is Frankenstein, directed by Guillermo del Toro. Obviously, at this point, I think everyone probably knows what the plot of Frankenstein is, whether you have seen this new version or not. But if you don't, the IMDb description says Dr. Victor Frankenstein, a brilliant but egotistical scientist, brings a creature to life in a monstrous experiment that ultimately leads to the undoing of both the creator and his tragic creation. All right. I guess the first place we got to start with was what were your personal thoughts on this before we get into each of the categories. I'm very curious to sort of see where you land on this. I believe we both saw this at TIFF back in September last year, if I'm not mistaken. One, I believe that because you saw every movie at TIFF every year, and two, there was also like 50 billion screenings of it at the festival.
It was a pretty hard one to miss at TIFF. But also this one is definitely the most well covered by both of our podcasts of the movies we're talking about today, because we did do a Halloween special episode on Frankenstein, which included this movie. And then over on my podcast, Classic Movies Live, we did one episode of the old James Whale Frankensteins, and then we did this Frankenstein as the next episode. I think very early November instead of Halloween for us. But we both talked about this one in at some length, and I remember saying on the Halloween episode, um, I think all three of us were, more positive than not on it. I think I've seen a lot of people be very very down on this movie, and I can't quite join them. I don't think it's my favorite Frankenstein adaptation, but I think that what Guillermo del Toro is doing with this movie is at least interesting enough that I do mostly like it. I don't think it. I think that like a lot of the marketing around it, well, maybe not marketing, but a lot of when Guillermo del Toro talks about this movie and when he like writes about this movie, one thing that he always stresses is that it's is that he wanted to make a faithful adaptation of the book, and I don't know that that's what this is. I think that on its face, there's a lot of like specific details from the book that aren't often adapted, like the boat, the big ship at the beginning, as a framing device. That's not often adapted, and so it's cool that that's in this movie. But I don't actually think that that this Guillermo del Toro version of Frankenstein is, you know, at least what I would typically think of as faithful. I think it does what any Frankenstein adaptation does have to do, which is pick one or two of the themes of this very thematically dense book and really go into them. And um, I think that he picked themes that are not the most common ones to explore. I think we said it. I think we might have said this. I don't know, maybe I'm repeating myself from the Frankenstein episode, but the most common theme I think as far as I'm concerned, as far as I can remember of adaptations of Frankenstein is, taking this person playing God and sort of exploring what that looks like for both the person who's playing God and the creature that he creates, where Guillermo del Toro takes that in a more explicitly parental angle about like fathers and sons, which I think that's interesting for this story. I don't totally think it always I don't think it like necessarily always works, and to me it's not the most interesting way to view this story, but it is a version of this story that I haven't seen often, and I like it more than I don't.
Mm. Yeah, this is one that I think, especially as time has passed on, I like it less and less.
Mhm.
Um, I want it so badly to love this film because of my admiration for Guillermo del Toro and his specific admiration for the Frankenstein story. He's been talking about wanting to make this movie for decades, and so much of the themes that are written in the original novel, the Mary Shelley novel, show up in his works elsewhere. This is a common reoccurrence in terms of people wanting to play God, the monsters within us, people that look like monsters aren't the real monsters. Whatever sort of thematic aspect that you want to say is a strand of the original Frankenstein story, he's explored it in other films of his. So, hearing that he was going to direct an adaptation of this finally, and then just being so underwhelmed by it, frankly. There are aspects of this that I did quite like, and we will get to them because some of the nominations really tie into that. But, overall, I was just so, yeah, just left feeling hollow. I didn't I didn't feel the same sympathy that I felt for like the original James Whale version.
Mm.
Um, or the sort of madness that we get in Young Frankenstein that that episode that we did together, things like that. And frankly, one of the nominations here. Actually, no, it did not end up getting a nomination for Best Visual Effects, which I'm very happy about because I thought the visual effects were pretty awful in my opinion. They Guillermo del Toro always stresses that he loves to use practical sets. and some of the sets are really beautiful, and then he kind of ruined them by using this really garish, bland CGI that just did not work for me. There's a moment in the film where his laboratory explodes, burns down basically, and I thought that was one of the worst sequences. It was probably the worst sequence in the entire film for me, and completely took me out of any enjoyment I had of the film.
Um, just to touch on an earlier point you made there, Frankenstein does like the story permeates his work so much. Like point to any one of Guillermo del Toro's movies, and it's not you don't have to reach in there too far to grab something that is at least inspired by or similar to something in the Frankenstein novel. Maybe Pacific Rim, it's a little tough to find out what that is, but it's still there.
Hmm.
I was just thinking, and actually, the way the scientists behave, there's probably something there. But I think that just he's explored so much of this novel thematically in everything else that, like, by the time he gets to actually adapt this novel that you can tell is very dear to him, it kind of just feels like there's nothing left to say about it.
Hmm.
Like it's just weird that Frankenstein is what his 15th movie or something, and by that point he's already done Frankenstein 15 times. So all that's left is the aesthetics of adapting what is technically on the surface of the novel, which is not the most interesting part.
Yeah, yeah. All right, well, let's get into the nominations here. We've got Best Picture, Best Supporting Actor for Jacob Elordi, Best Adapted Screenplay for Guillermo del Toro, Best Cinematography for Dan Louston, Best Production Design for Tamara Deverell and Shane Vio, Best Costume Design for Kate Hawley, Best Makeup and Hairstyling for Mike Hill, Jordan Samuel, and Cleona Furry, and Best Original Score for Alexander Desplat, and Best Sound for Greg Chapman, Nathan Robitaille, Nelson Ferreira, Christian Cook, and Brad Zorn. So let's start off at the top there with Best Picture. This is, we've talked about this over the last two episodes. We've got two films that sort of seem to be going head to head between one battle after another in Sinners. After that, you kind of have to start looking at what has the most nominations, and because that means that there's broad guild support, which means there's lots of different people that like it. So you think about where it might place in a ballot. Best Picture is the only category that does use a rank choice voting. So that is something you need to be considering when you're trying to predict who's going to win Best Picture, because maybe if Sinners isn't the winner, what's going to be the second choice vote for Sinners, and is that going to help elevate it to be Best Picture contender? The fact that Frankenstein has 9 nominations clearly shows that there is broad support. Guillermo del Toro is a longtime favorite of the Academy. He's a previous Best Picture and Best Director winner. Almost all of his recent films over the last, 10 plus years since Pan's Labyrinth, almost 20 years, have all received Oscar nominations, almost every single one of them. I haven't gone back to double check that or not, but just about every single one has. So yeah, you can't discount Guillermo del Toro, one of his films ever. So all that said, where do you sort of view Frankenstein in terms of the group of 10 that it finds itself in?
Um, well, I mean, on my personal ballot, I don't think it would be very high, but when I'm thinking about its chances to win, I think it's probably I would probably put it as a long shot. I don't think it's just happy to be there because it was but there's 2 movies on this Best Picture list that are distributed by Netflix. Only one that is produced by Netflix. This is that one. And this was very clearly Netflix's big push. Netflix, they have a lot of power here. They haven't won anything yet, but they do, usually get something here. So really it's not that much of a surprise to see it here. And also, it got a lot of it. There's, like you said, there's broad guild support. It has been winning awards in other places and getting a lot of nominations. I don't think that it's anywhere close to being a front runner, but I think I don't think it's going to be bottom of most ballots. I think it's going to be, it's going to be somewhere in the middle, and in some odd situation where everything above it is very controversial among voters. Maybe, who knows? So I put it as a long shot.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I sort of have a clear tier of two films in the frontrunner category, One Battle and Sinners. I've got three films in the dark horse category, which is Hamnet, Sentimental Value, and another one we're going to talk about today. And then this is sort of in that next group where I'm not really sure what order I would place it, but that sort of grouping of, secret agents. No, but maybe it sort of is alone because, both Secret Agent and Train Dreams don't really have enough support. And so I wonder if that's going to sort of hold it back a little bit. So it's sort of tough. But I definitely think that Frankenstein is firmly within the long shot category, probably coming in around number 6 overall.
Yeah, that sounds about where I would put it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's move over to Best Supporting Actor. This is the only acting nomination that this film got, which I don't want to say is surprising because I wasn't over the moon for either Oscar Isaac or Mia Goth, and also two-time Oscar winner Christoph Waltz as well. For me, walking out, the one huge thing that worked for me was Jacob Elordi's performance. I've sort of really been growing into a huge fan of his work. I think he's been picking really interesting projects. I think he does really great character work here and making you really sympathize and empathize with this creature and the sort of developmental growth that he goes on. I was right there with him. So him being nominated in supporting was something I was very hopeful for and excited about. And when it did come out that he was nominated, I was very happy. In fact, this is a very stacked category. I would put him, right up there as one of my favorites of the grouping. That said, it sort of seems like when the film came out, he had a lot of buzz behind him, but it sort of seems like the buzz has completely gone sideways and instead shifted to whether it's going to be Stellan Skarsgård or one of the One Battle gentlemen. Between Sean Penn and Benicio del Toro. So it sort of seems like Elordi is falling to the wayside. I still sort of think he's a bit of a dark horse candidate, but it seems like he's, dropping further and further behind every day that passes. We've got a couple big award shows left at the time of this recording before the Oscars that he has a chance to maybe gain a bit of momentum, but I'm really not seeing a path for him anymore.
Uh yeah, I think I mean, there's always at least one category like this where, even what am I trying to say here? It's just an incredibly stacked category. Like, I can't usually or oftentimes in one of the acting categories, and in fact, I can do that this year in a different acting category that we're not talking about today, so I won't do that. But usually there's at least one acting category where I can point at someone and be like, I did not like that person in that movie, and I don't know why they're here. And that is not Best Actor in Supporting Role because I like every one of these performances. I really liked Jacob Elordi here, but I mean, I don't even know how I would rank these performances. And as far as like momentum behind them goes, yeah, I think you're right. He had some buzz when this movie just came out, and then One Battle After Another came out and, took that away. And then Delroy Lindo got that big push recently after he started getting what kind of felt like surprise nominations for Sinners, um, when when the big awards announced their nominations. But then really, when I've been hearing conversations about this, it's conversations about this category. It's is it even possible for Stellan Skarsgård to lose? So, I think I put him as a long shot because I do think that there is I don't know. It's hard if I actually if I like the person if I like the nomination, it's hard for me to say there's no chance. But
Mhm.
he actually may have the least chance of these people.
Interesting. Where do you stand on the concept of, well, not the concept, but the probability of vote splitting within this category between Del Toro and Penn for One Battle After Another? Or do you think voters, if they have a preference of if they want to vote for one, are going to coalesce behind one of these two?
I think vote splitting could very easily happen there because I don't think I think that I think that Sean Penn has a little bit of a media role in that movie, but, like, they're both very they're both kind of filling the same type of supporting role, and both of them are equally memorable. Like, this isn't a case of, like, Daniel Kaluuya versus Lakeith Stanfield, where one of them is clearly the standout of the movie, and the other person is very good, but, like, he exists to support Daniel Kaluuya, who is, well, in that case, was kind of more the lead anyway. Um, but yeah, I don't think this is a case where there's one of those performances is like, "Huh, I wonder why that's there." I think they very well could split the vote there, which honestly, if anything, benefits Stellan Skarsgård more than anyone.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna ask you, my follow-up was, do you think that could potentially benefit Elordi, or do you think Skarsgård is gonna be the main benefactor of that?
I think that anything that potentially hurts any of these nominees just just like widens the gap between Stellan Skarsgård and whoever is being heard.
Mhm. Yeah, no, like I said, we are a couple major precursors still to go before the Oscars, but it really sort of seems that, as each week passes, Skarsgård really is cementing his place as the one to beat with no one really coming close to him.
Mhm.
All right, well, let's move over to Best Adapted Screenplay. This is an interesting one because so often, with this category, most people probably have not either read the source material or things like this, but Frankenstein is literally one of the most famous books of all time. Most people usually had to read it in an English or literature class while they were growing up, at least in North America. I don't know about elsewhere. I'm sure it's taught in England as well, quite a bit. And there's been numerous adaptations. It's kind of like when there's a Shakespeare adaptation where, it's a little bit easier to compare it to the source material rather than maybe some of the other films that might be nominated in this category where, it's so hard to tell. What are we considering a good adaptation? Are we just taking this screenplay on face value, or are we taking the original source material and how it was changed into a film into consideration? So this is something that I think probably hurts the film a little bit because I remember you were talking about it off the top. So much of the press seemed to be about how this is the most accurate representation of the Frankenstein novel ever put to film and all this sort of stuff. And the discussion has very kind of quickly died down. People aren't really talking like that anymore. It really sort of seemed like a bit of a marketing gimmick,
Mm.
and not something that, people that were truly familiar with the source material would say.
Well, and I don't know. I don't even know how to really like evaluate the statement of this being like a faithful adaptation because to me it's faithful in the way that like I mean, like, sorry to call out comic book fans that here. I am also one. But when comic book Twitter and stuff like that is like, we need a faithful adaptation of Spider-Man or some superhero, and what they mean is like putting Wolverine in the suit and having him fight a big Hulk. It's like, yes, he did that in the comics, but like, what are we saying other than just like what do you think faithful means beyond aesthetics?
Yeah.
And to me, that's kind of what's in here. It's not that there's nothing interesting in this movie. I do think there is, and I think it's worth like, examining how this does adapt to the source material. But I also think that like the most interesting parts of like this movie, maybe just because, you know, it is a very dense text and you need to focus on something. It it excises a lot of what is really interesting about the book because there's no time for it, even if it did adapt it really, really, really well. Um, and a lot of the quote unquote faithful adaptations are just like, I mean, I keep using this word, but aesthetic things that aren't adapted very often. The fact that there is a ship as a framing device, the like specific way that Frankenstein's monster looks. A lot of way too much of the story being devoted to Victor just sort of like dancing around in Venice. Venice? Yeah, maybe. I might be a little wrong on exactly where that is, but like those aren't. I mean, I guess that's faithful to details, but like other adaptations of Frankenstein take more liberties in order to be more true to those to like different themes,
Hmm.
which, this movie also does, but like that's not what we're talking about when it's that's not what's being talked about when the press is saying this is a faithful adaptation. They're talking about the fact that there's a ship as a framing device, which is cool, but like that's what that means.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. I think that's a very good point to make in terms of what does it mean to be a faithful adaptation of something, especially when you're trying to depict themes versus literal text, which is
And that's Oh,
yeah.
sorry. I was gonna say, and that's why I think that adapted screenplay is actually a really interesting category this year. Maybe it's always an interesting category. Maybe it's just that this year I actually know a lot of the things that are being adapted here. But like Frankenstein is probably the most straight adaptation in this category. Bugonia is adapted from a Korean film that like and it takes those same themes and updates them in a very interesting way. Hamnet is also a straight adaptation of a novel, but like you know, is a very it is an interesting historical fiction. One Battle After Another is it's I mean it's kind of an open secret that it's an adapted screenplay because they intentionally avoided like tying it explicitly to Vineland wherever they could, and then Train Dreams we'll talk about, but they take a lot of liberties with the novella to really sort of again hone in on different themes and make it basically a different story than the novella. Which there's a lot of really interesting adaptation going on here. I mean, frankly, Frankenstein is kind of the least interesting in terms of adaptation that's happening here.
Mhm. Yeah, in terms of my own personal preference, I absolutely agree with you. It'd be number 5 for me. In terms of its odds to win, I have it as a long shot, but, it's inching closer to being just happy to be there, frankly, in my books. What about you?
Yeah, I also put it as just happy to be there, and I mean, for all the reasons I just gave my reasons why I think it would be my number 5 pick. The reason I put it as just happy to be there is because it's gonna go to One Battle After Another, and if it doesn't, it's gonna go to Hamnet.
Yeah.
And I guess that's only 2 things that I've mentioned, but, like, it's between those 2. I don't even really consider the other 3 that serious of, contender. I don't know what their path to victory looks like,
Mhm.
and I certainly don't see that for Frankenstein.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you there. All right, let's move on to best cinematography, and very much like how I talked about the visual effects not working with me, the cinematography didn't really work for me either. There's far too much sweeping camera movements, scaling the large buildings or, gliding across this frozen body of water and stuff like that that just didn't really work for me and just felt so artificial. And this is not a story where I want that sort of feeling coming out of the movie. I really want to feel the interiority complex that's going on in this doctor, the madness that he's feeling and this control that he's trying to exert over other people. And then this sort of heartbreak and sadness of his creation. And I didn't really get that with anything to do with the cinematography. It looked fine, but, like, I think oftentimes a litmus test with a movie with great cinematography is, could you, pull specific frames and blow them up and hang them in a museum, hang them on your wall? Would you want to do that? And there's nothing about the cinematography in this film that would make me wanna do that, frankly.
Uh, I mean, I'm gonna echo a lot of your sentiments again. I basically think the same thing. With some of these nominations here, let me just pull up what they were. Yeah, with some of these nominations here, and I'm not gonna go through in every single one, but like I look at them and I'm like, oh my god, what a beautiful movie. And then I look at Frankenstein, I'm like, you know what? Yes, that movie was beautiful, which you can already hear in my voice that like I had to be reminded of that, right? So, the cinematography, it's good, but like nothing. when I think back to Frankenstein, there are bits and like I can remember some images, but I'm not remembering them because they're a beautiful shot. I'm remembering them because Jacob Elordi sure is actually really tall.
Yeah.
So that's it's fine. I don't hate it being here, but I don't. It's up against four real heavyweights.
Yeah, and that's the case where, this is often the category where it's so easy to look at it and be like, wow, they really nailed getting the nomination right, or oof, that's a big miss here. And you look at the nominees that it's up against, and it's got Sinners, Train Dreams, One Battle After Another, and Marty Supreme. And frankly, all four of those films absolutely blow Frankenstein out of the water for me.
I promise I have interesting things to say about cinematography, and we will get to them because we're about to talk about two more of those movies.
100%. So yeah, I guess that all said, I have it as just happy to be there. This sort of feels like it got swept up with the nominations in the other guilds and helped Frankenstein overperform on nomination day. I looked up just now what Dan Laus has also shot. This is his third Oscar nomination for shooting a Del Toro film. He also got nominated for The Shape of Water and Nightmare Alley, both films that I think are shot far more beautifully and interesting, to say the least.
Oh yeah, Nightmare Alley is one that I can think back on and be like, "Oh man, that was a beautiful film." I didn't have to be reminded.
Yeah,
So,
no kidding.
yeah, I think I would agree with just happy to be there. It's got the guild support to get the nomination in the first place, but look at the competition, man.
Yeah.
Like it's congratulations to Dan Lausman for your nomination.
Yeah. My only thing left to say is it's a bit of a shame we couldn't get a better shot film in this category to make this category even more stacked than usual.
Mhm.
Okay, well, let's move over to best production design. And I talked about Del Toro's love for practical sets, and his laboratory looks great. His, when he's in the classroom giving his lecture in front of those people, that set looks really good. There's a lot of really interesting castle stuff that happens. I have this as a front runner, but like I'm not excited about this category for it to win.
I think I am gonna say what I wrote down. I don't disagree with your front runner. I think that I personally put it as a dark horse. And one big reason about that is that a lot of what Guillermo del Toro has like a lot of what I've seen Guillermo del Toro personally talking about and doing little featurettes on and like behind the scenes is the production design. He's very proud of the production design of this. And in a lot of cases, he should be. I don't know that it necessarily, I think maybe the biggest crime here is that how impressive the production design is behind the scenes does not always, in this case, actually translate to like what's in the movie. Because like if you look at his the tower he built is incredible to see, like, the little miniature that they put together for, um, for that set. But then when you watch it in the movie, it just kinda looks like, a tower that falls apart, and, like, it's very impressive in a way that, big shiny things on Netflix are impressive. But, like, it's if you look at the behind the scenes of this, the stuff that they built for it is really cool, and I think that, as long as production design I don't know entirely what happens behind the scenes to get these votes, but, like, if if when people are voting on production design, they're not just voting from having seen the movie, but they're voting based on, the production designers coming and showing what they did, which does happen for a lot of these movies, then I think this one that's where this shot is. That's where this one does have a shot because there is a lot of really cool stuff they did that I just think didn't translate to the movie. So I do have it as a dark horse. You're probably not wrong with Frontrunner, but I think that everything I just said about Frankenstein, there is also some really cool stuff going on behind the scenes in these other movies too.
Mm.
And there are one or two here that there's one or two or three, four actually, that where that does translate much better to what you actually see.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to make. Let's shift over to costume design. And this is another one where I think it has a strong chance to walk away with a win. And I say that on two fronts. I've been very hard on this movie. That said, I do think the costumes, especially the gowns that Mia Goth gets to wear, are truly stunning. There is some really beautiful works of art within the costume department on display here. The other thing that I think has it going for it is its competition and the type of films that the Academy traditionally likes to award the best costume design aren't here as competition. We have a lot of I don't want to say plain or basic clothing, but I think of Sinners and outside of the smoke and stack suits, it is very functional clothing. They're not flashy. Same with Hamnet as well. We get a little bit once they're on the stage and we get to see the stage costumes. We'll talk about Marty Supreme later. And on the nomination day, we talked about Avatar Fire and Ash. Since then, I finally have seen it. And, you explained why it's here, and it's probably here because of its technical achievements. That said, I don't think it deserves to be here, frankly. So by default, Frankenstein is the number one film in this category for me in terms of what I think will win.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a front runner. I think it's my number 5 here. It's probably my least favorite of these. But it's good costumes. I like them. They're good costumes. I like everything else in this category much better. Probably, we're gonna talk about this category again. I disagree with you on Avatar.
Yes, I know we disagree a little bit on that franchise for sure. Okay, well, let's move on to the next one, which is best makeup and hairstyling. And, most of this is going to come from the Elordi performance. Very, very often times we sort of end up focusing on one character who sort of gets the most of the makeup and hairstyling, and that's sort of the emblematic look of where the nomination has come from and things like that. Like, not to say that Oscar Isaac's wig work and sideburns work isn't good, or Mia Goth's hairstyling isn't good, or notable, but this got nominated due to Elordi's prosthetic works that they have on him, and I thought they did a great job. It was very unique. You've seen more Frankensteins than I have, but by my estimation, I have not seen a Frankenstein that has looked like this. Where do you sort of fall on, his look and the comparisons to other Frankensteins?
I think it's great. I think that I mean a lot of my analysis here is going to be there are better Frankenstein scholars than I am. I will preface by saying, but I think that there is over the last couple of years, especially, I have observed, and again, can't say that I'm totally an expert here, but I've observed like people trying to sort of move away from the Boris Karloff Frankenstein just because that was the standard for so long, and it's actually quite different from what's in the book. It's just that it is also such an iconic design that it's really hard to try and make something that is as interesting as that, like make something that is closer to the book or that is different from that Boris Karloff design and have it be interesting. And I think that this one is not only interesting, but like I think it's a pretty much a perfect version of, if not Boris Karloff, then what? Because I think that Jacob Elordi does have a very um like he looks great in this, and it is memorable. Like the other example of what I'm trying to say, I think, is Robert De Niro, who also looked very different from the Boris Karloff Frankenstein, but over time, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that that design has stood the test of time quite as well as you'd hope. And I don't know, it's hard to tell, like not even a year after the movie came out. So I don't know if this one will stand the test of time, but I think it's definitely a much different take on Frankenstein than people are used to in terms of the look, and I think that it does pull it off really well. Um, does that answer the question that you asked? I kind of went on a ramble there.
I mean, in a roundabout way, I believe it did. I'm just here to sort of get your thoughts on it. Do you have this as a front runner to win? Because
Mm,
also like the sort of costume debate, this is often the most hair and makeup, and I sort of while I haven't seen Kokuo and the Ugly Stepsister, unfortunately those two are going to suffer from not enough people having seen them. It does have a lot of prosthetic work, which is something they value.
it does, and I think that I it um this is also a really interesting category this year. There's some really good nominees here. Frankenstein is, I mean, as you already pointed out, and as I was just talking about, it's nominated here pretty much for Jacob Elordi's look in this. And so I think it's of all of these nominees, it's the one that I think is riding the most on like one single, I guess, piece of makeup work. But it is a really impressive piece of makeup work, and movies have won for one single piece of makeup work before. I think back to The Whale, where there's a lot of interesting stuff that was happening there from a makeup performance, not performance, makeup perspective, but it was just like the makeup on Brendan Fraser,
Hmm.
and I think I have it as front runner for this because I think a lot of what you remember of this movie is the makeup on Jacob Elordi. Basically every part of these nominations that is Jacob Elordi centric is I think its strongest is I think one of the strongest parts of the movie.
Yeah.
So like well I was gonna say that's where I have it as front runner, but that's not true because I don't have Jacob Elordi as the front runner in Best Supporting Actor. But I do think that like you know, of this movie's nominations, the ones that are Jacob Elordi centric are largely the most, in my opinion, deserved.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. The Jacob Elordi aspect of it. He may be close to number one in our hearts, but not in the eyes of the voters.
Mhm.
Yeah, I have it as a front runner too for everything that you were just saying there as well. All right, let's move over to Best Original Score by Alexander Desplat. This is a tough one because I don't listen to as much scores as you do. I know you enjoy listening to sort of scores as your general music listening, and I have not gone back to revisit this, and I wasn't too enthused with it when it came out, and I don't have any sort of memory of the themes itself. And I look at what it's up against, which are a lot more memorable. I have this as just happy to be there.
Yeah, I agree. There are two scores on this that I don't remember very well, and this is one of them. And again, it's up against powerhouses. I'm actually not even entirely certain why this is nominated here, because there were a lot of great scores this year, and I don't know. I haven't gone back and listened to it. Maybe I'm being hasty in saying this. I don't think it's that great. I don't think it's that great a score. It does what it needs to in the movie. So, on in that respect, it's good enough at least, but this is I don't think it's one of the best of the year the way that, you would hope for an awards ceremony like this.
Or frankly, even for a film like this should have one of the most sweeping, grandiose scores of the year, and it doesn't feel like it.
Maybe this is an oversimplification, but I think the main thesis of us talking about Frankenstein here is it should have been amazing, but it was kind of boring.
Yep, yep. It's a shame. Well, we have one more category left, and that is best sound. And very much like the score, I'm having it as just happy to be there. We got some interesting sound effects of the ship creaking in the frozen water, and then of course the big explosion scene that takes place. But like, this isn't really a sound-filled movie in the way some of the other films are, and obviously this is also a bit of this whole year is kind of odd for the technical categories, I would say, in terms of the types of movies that they were nominated, not the usual ones that they do. Uh, I've talked about this on both previous episodes. There isn't a big war or action type film in this category. The closest we have is F1 with the great car sound. And then after that, it doesn't, none of the nominees kind of fit in the typical mold of this category. And frankly, Frankenstein being here, I have no idea how it got nominated. If I was to go over other eligible films, I'm sure I could come up with 24 better choices than this one.
I mean, this is maybe a slight tangent, but Sirat is literally a movie about sound. So like it's awesome that that's here. And
100%.
in a just world, that would be the winner pretty easily. Yeah, as for Frankenstein, I'm not sure what it's doing here.
Yeah.
Just
Uh,
happy to be here, I guess.
to answer your tangent, I love that Seurat got nominated here. That is a very inspired pick by the Academy, and one that in any other year we would have been going like, I can't believe they didn't even consider Seurat. What is wrong with them? But no, it is here, and great that it got nominated.
Mhm.
Okay, so yeah, that's Frankenstein. I'm looking at 2 wins for sure, but it looks like it's probably topping out at 3 wins. Do you sort of feel similarly, or do you differ in how many you think it has locked down?
I I am maybe this is me hope dicting, but I think makeup may end up being a lot more competitive than maybe it at first appears. So I don't know that I have it locked in for 2 wins, but I think I would say locked in for one certainly, and then maybe as many as three.
You think that's sort of maybe its ceiling at its best?
I think I think so. I would be a little surprised to see more than that, but I don't know. I've been surprised before. Who knows?
All right, well, let's move on to our second film, and that is Marty Supreme, directed by Josh Safdie. Marty Mauser, a young man with a dream no one respects, goes to hell and back in pursuit of greatness. What did you think of this film, Jeff? Were you a fan of the other Safdie brother film this year?
Oh, I loved this movie. Marty Supreme was like top 3 for me last year. I think it may have fallen a little bit. I need to double check, what movies all came out in 2025, but it's very, very high up there. I really loved this. I was a big fan of Uncut Gems when it came out, and I think I need to rewatch both of them side by side because I'm not sure which one I like better. I think I still like Uncut Gems better, but Marty Supreme is very good. This was a big highlight of my year.
Mm. Yeah, I quite liked it too. I definitely liked it significantly more than Benny Safdie's film, The Smashing Machine, which was a huge miss in my opinions. But you already sort of brought up the comparison to Uncut Gems, and yeah, I think the big thing is we're going to talk about Ronald Braunstein and his involvement with this film, and it sort of seems like Josh and Ronald Braunstein sort of are more to credit for the atmosphere of films like Uncut Gems and Good Time than maybe Benny is. That said, yeah, I really enjoyed this film. It did feel a little too similar to Uncut Gems for my liking. Like I wanted maybe a little bit of a change in style from him specifically. But that said, it's still an extremely well crafted film, very entertaining. You talked about it on your podcast in terms of how it sort of differs the characterization between the Howard Ratner and the Marty Mauser and sort of what they represent.
Mm.
So I think that's if I'm going to make sure to link to all your Best Picture episodes that we talk about from these 4 nominees for people to check out. But yeah, I really enjoyed this film too.
Hell yeah.
All right. Well, this film also has 9 nominations, and they are Best Picture, Best Director for Josh Safdie, Best Actor for Timothée Chalamet, Best Original Screenplay for Josh Safdie and Ronald Braunstein, Best Casting, Jennifer Vendetti, Best Cinematography for Darius Khondji, Best Production Design for Jack Fisk and Adam Willis, Best Editing for Josh Safdie and Ronald Braunstein, and Best Costume Design for Miyoko Belize. So let's talk about Best Picture. This has the same amount of nominations as Frankenstein, 9. So one of those things, this is in the upper echelon for the amount of nominations for Best Picture contenders. That is obviously something we have to consider in terms of what we were talking about earlier with Frankenstein. That said, unlike Frankenstein, which I feel like it maybe picked up a couple extra nominations just due to the momentum, Marty Supreme really does sort of feel like, to me, as a dark horse in that next, sort of mushy group of three of trying to figure out who's jostling for true frontrunner status behind One Battle in Sinners. Does that feel is that how you feel about this film?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And I think that one thing that I mean we're about to talk about it, so I'll just sort of hint at it. One thing that Marty Supreme really has going for it is Timothy Chalamet, who we'll get to in probably like 3 minutes, so I'll just hold off.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. Having a true sort of A-list superstar talent there to sort of center your campaigning around really does sort of help it, because he is the embodiment of this film in a way that, Leonardo DiCaprio, while he is a true A-list superstar, is sort of not centering the campaign around him for one battle after another.
hmm yeah. So, I mean, like I said, we'll talk about him in just a minute, but I also have this as a dark horse. I do think, as you pointed out, there are two movies which are more obvious front runners, but if one of those were to miss, or like if both of those were to miss, then I think it's in like the next group right down from there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it sort of feels like it really might be coming down between this and Hamnet for the true, next in line after those two.
Yeah, would I that was what I was thinking as the other part of that group.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well let's talk about Best Director, and this has suddenly become a very interesting discussion point. The Josh Safdie of it all. We're not really gonna dance around it, but there's been some serious allegations against him and, to a lesser extent, his brother and a former producer partner of theirs, where during the filming of Good Time, there was very likely some inappropriate actions taken to with a underage performer who was pressured to do on-screen nudity and other potential assault allegations. Her scenes did end up getting cut out, so they did not make it. So it's sort of it does bring a bit of real darkness to what should be a fun endeavor, which is the Oscars. There's often mudslinging and weird accusations that go around Oscar season. That's sort of just typical campaigning, but this sort of has felt a little bit more serious than recent years in terms of allegations against an artist. It doesn't seem like it's fully derailed the campaign, but it definitely sort of seems like the studio and Josh Safdie himself has sort of stepped back his level of campaigning.
Yeah, and it is worth mentioning that these these allegations aren't new. Like
Yeah.
this was, I believe, first reported on 3 years ago, and I mean, I was surprised to hear about it the first time this year too. A little disappointed in myself for not having heard about it before, because I think this should have been a much bigger deal when the like the first time that story was published, and not that it shouldn't be a big deal now. I think this should have been dealt with when that first came out.
hmm Yeah, it sort of felt like the fact that when the news came out originally a few years ago, I don't know if it was swept under the rug or not. I don't remember hearing about it. I don't know if I did or not. Uh, but like whatever happened, he seemed to have weathered the storm and was able to still get such a high profile directing job. And it doesn't seem like it's really going to derail his career at this time. I think, he might stay low for the next couple of years, especially once this campaign is over, the Oscar season is over, and then maybe come back again. But yeah, at the moment, it doesn't seem like it's going to have long-lasting effects on his career. Obviously, things might change. I don't know. All that said, it feels like it's, pretty harmful to his chances of winning. Already, I had him fairly low in this category of Best Director. It's a pretty stacked category this year. And then with these allegations, I think it sort of allows people who might be on the fence of like, ooh, do I want to vote for Josh Safdie or do I want to vote for someone else? Kind of gives them the avenue to go, you know what? I don't like these unsavory allegations. I'm going to vote for someone else. And so because of that, I think he is firmly in the just happy to be there category, 5 out of 5 easily for me.
I do think though that one thing you said earlier, to a lesser extent, Benny Safdie, I I don't think that it's to a much lesser extent at all. I think that it's only to a lesser extent harmful. Like I think that that article that came out only makes Benny Safdie look better in that it makes him look like a complete tool. Um, because
Yes.
he this is a story about a movie that shot in 2016, I believe, where both brothers were had co-director credits. And in the story, Benny Safdie, like Josh Safdie, doesn't speak up, and Benny Safdie does even less because the one time that there's any action from Benny Safdie, it's him being put in his place by his brother. And then this article was positioned by Benny Safdie's team as the reason that the brothers split up and went different ways for different movies, which doesn't make any sense because they did another movie together right after that. Uh, and I believe possibly even after that had at least internally come to light. So they knew about it and did another movie anyway.
Yep.
So it's an article that I think makes everyone involved look very bad and that seems woefully incomplete. I don't think that the complete story would make anyone look better. I just think that it the releasing of that article looks it, what I'm trying to say is it looks like someone tried to put out a hit piece and it backfired. And I'm not saying that and when I say it sounds like a hit piece, I don't think it sounds fake. I think there is more to the story that like doesn't that makes things worse, if anything, just for whatever reason is still being covered up, which is very strange. I think it's a very strange article.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there because, like you had already said, none of this was new information that was coming to light. It was just sort of a regurgitation of previous things that had supposedly come out several years ago. And unless some of these parties speak up about it, it sort of seems like we're just dealing with the old information. And you're absolutely right. It only makes Benny look better in comparison by making him look incompetent and an idiot, like you said. That's about it.
Yeah, I don't know. Stuff like this bothers me for all the obvious reasons, but also because there's clearly so much more to the story that is just not being said that like, you know, not to get all Illuminati brain, but there's so much stuff that happens in Hollywood that we just don't hear about until it's way too late. And I wish that like we would hear about stuff before it was way too late. I wish people would speak up. And I don't know who isn't speaking up here, but someone isn't, and I wish they would. Or I wish that I don't know. You know what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. We'll try not to belabor the point this much. But yeah, do you have Safdie in a similar position that I do?
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's move over to Best Actor, a category that you eagerly want to talk about. So I'm going to just leave the floor to you. Tell me what you think about Chalamet's performance and where it stands as its odds to win.
Yeah, I mean, like he's fantastic in this movie. He is Marty Supreme. He is the like reason to go and watch this movie. And I think he's a front runner here. Just even up against all the other heavy hitters that he is up against. I think that he's the favorite to win here. And I think a big part of that and a big part of like what has helped this movie get the momentum it has is that Timothy Chalamet is basically in character campaigning for this movie and has been since I want to say October, September maybe even. Like everything is built. It does feel like all of the press around this movie is built around how good Timothy Chalamet is in it. But then even when he's talking about it, he's, doing wild and crazy stuff to get people to like look at him, look at my movie. And so I think that like he is drawing people to this movie, and just that alone is, I think, enough to put him as front runner for this cat for best actor in a leading role at these Oscars. But beyond that, he has an incredible narrative because last year he was nominated for playing Bob Dylan, and had he won then, he would have been the youngest ever winner in this category, Best Actor in a Leading Role. He did not. Instead, he lost to the previous youngest ever winner for Best Actor in a Leading Role. So, like, if he was nominated for, I don't know, some random bullshit here, I think he'd have a great narrative because it's like overdue, weirdly enough, at 28 years old, maybe 30. He's very young, and he's already accomplished enough of an actor that it feels like this award is overdue for him. But then also, this is the best performance of his career so far.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm in agreement with you of a lot of that. I think his main competition sort of seems like it might be Leo, but Leo doesn't seem to be campaigning really for himself at all. He's spending a lot of his time and energy focusing on his co-stars and Paul Thomas Anderson and putting his weight behind there, which seems to be benefiting a lot of people greatly. And the fact that he won for The Revenant sort of removed his overdue narrative. If he hadn't won for The Revenant, I think Leo would have been an absolute shoo-in to win here because of that narrative. And so, not that Chalamet is overdue, but he sort of seems to have been, the next man up the last few years in terms of whether or not he was going to win or get nominated or things like that. And definitely last year with his performance and as Bob Dylan, it really sort of felt like he was so close. Like it was, I don't know, we never know what the vote tallies actually are, but it had to have been very close. They were splitting awards all season between the two of them, so it must have been a super close competition. I have him as a front runner as well. The only thing that we see all these, ridiculous blind ballots where people talk about what their votes were that reveal anonymous ballots, not blind ballots, anonymous ballots. And maybe there are going to be people that are going to be turned off by his antics during the campaigning specifically as Marty Mauser. But I don't think it's going to be enough to really derail it because in a perfect world, I feel like Michael B. Jordan would be his main competition, but it sort of seems like it's not, which is very surprising.
Timothy Chalamet's antics on this particular press tour have reminded me a little bit about when I was 1 year too old for the local Halloween costume contest, but I really wanted to win because I'd been entering that costume contest for the last 5 or 6 years, and I'd always had like a very high effort costume, and I'd always lost to something that was probably better, but I was young, so I was always bitter about it. The last year I competed, I went as Helga, the Russian gymnastics trainer. So basically, I just wore a dress and like made fake boobs for myself. And then when we were up on stage and and the announcer was going around talking to everybody, trying to get them to explain their costumes, I was flexing constantly. I was getting all of the attention on me. I didn't want people to hear what little Jimmy, who's 5 years old, entering for his first time. I didn't care about him. I didn't want other people to care about him. I wanted them to look at me so that I would win. And I won. So, that's what this reminds me of.
Yeah, yeah. You told that great story on your podcast as well, and I really enjoyed it then. It very well could be the case of, he is sucking up all of the oxygen and not leaving, anything to anyone else. There was a lot of talk about Ethan Hawke as well when he first got nominated of maybe putting a surprise push, especially that he could easily use the overdue narrative amongst the five of them. And he is sort of completely fallen off. And the Academy just sort of seems loath to award performances that are not in English, and so that sort of unfortunately disqualifies Wagner Moura. We're going to talk about that a little bit as well, and coming up next. But yeah, so it sort of leaves just Timothy Chalamet.
Yeah, I don't know how you like the correct thing to do, it feels like, when you're campaigning for Oscars is to try and be humble. And, I wouldn't expect it to normally work if you build an Oscars campaign around, how much you personally deserve it. But for Timothy Chalamet, it just seems to have worked. Some people are like kind of pissed off about it, but not enough to where it makes me feel like he's gonna lose because people don't like him.
Yeah, no, you're completely right there. All right, well, let's move on to our next category, and that's best original screenplay, and sort of everything that we were talking about with Josh Safdie. We're not going to repeat ourselves, but like I think he's got 3 nominations here. All of them could potentially go against him because of those allegations.
Mm.
But I don't want to belabor that point too much. So instead, we'll sort of just talk about this a little bit. You know, for me, if I was a voter, I would also consider the fact that this feels sort of similar to Uncut Gems. I know they are different films, but it doesn't feel original enough to me in comparison to some of the other films in this category. And the fact that they're up against such a powerhouse film in Sinners really hurts its odds to win. I have it in the dark horse range, probably in the 3 or 4. Unfortunately, there's two, probably in the 3 range, because there's 2 films that just really aren't getting any love whatsoever, and it was Just an Accident and Blue Moon, 2 films I both really enjoyed, but they just stand at absolutely no chance to get anything. So by default, Marty Supreme feels like a 3rd place for me.
Yeah, I also put this in dark horse. I do think I do actually think that like this could be where you know Ronald Bronstein's involvement has the most sway, because I mean, maybe just personally, I think of Ronald Bronstein. I think of this, at least in terms of writing, as more of a Ronald Bronstein movie. But I think that what you were mentioning about Josh Safdie's nominations potentially being hurt by the Josh Safdie of it all. I think maybe in original screenplay, Ronald Bronstein might be able to offset that a bit. But I don't know if that's just what's happening in my own head. I don't know if that actually carries over into the real world. But it is a strong screenplay. It This movie, just period, has a very strong awards push. I do think it's a dark horse. I don't think it's the front runner because of everything you've already mentioned. But I think that maybe just like sweeping everything else up into it, it I would have a hard time saying it doesn't have a chance to win, at least.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you. It just sort of seems like it's drifting further and further back from the pack
Mhm.
in terms of being a true contender. All right, let's move over to best casting. And as I've said every episode, I still don't really know how the Oscars are going to move forward with this category. What is your take on what you think they might be looking for in terms of potential winners?
Okay, so the simple answer, and I'll give a better answer, but the simple answer is I don't know. Um,
Correct.
I put this as front runner because when I think of what a best casting award should be, this is like the perfect version of that. But I also put a question mark because I don't know what this award means yet. Like beyond beyond the obvious, this is an award for best casting, and I know what casting is, and I know what I think makes good casting. I don't know what the Academy is going to be typically looking for. And in the past, and this is on me, have not paid that much attention to the other awards ceremonies that do have best casting. So I I'm just I kind of don't know. But what I am hoping that they're looking for is like holistically, looking at all of the movies in here have a lot of actors in a lot of smaller roles too. And what I'm hoping that they're looking for is like not Marty Supreme was written for Timothy Chalamet and they brought him in to do it, but more like every one of the roles in this was kind of pitch perfect for, 1 minute, the 1 minute of screen time they got. And I think that all of the movies that are in here, do represent that fairly well. But this is the first year that that's being awarded. So I don't know. Maybe after this year, based on Hamnet winning or Marty Supreme winning, we'll have a better idea what exactly they're looking for in terms of this kind of casting. I think it's the front runner, but that's because I have no idea what this award means yet.
Yeah, I would probably put this as my favorite of the 5 nominees.
Mhm.
I think of so many of the supporting and bit players in this film that just leave such an indelible impression on viewers, that do such a great job of creating this atmosphere and having great interactions with Chalamet, where, so much of this movie is Chalamet sort of trying to figure out how to crack the code of whatever problem he's come up against, and every time he's up against what I would say it would be a very admirable foe, whether it's, Abel Ferrara, who plays this gangster who he takes care of his dog and then tries to con him to get money to get the dog back, or Tyler the Creator as his friend who he needs to kind of convince to go along with some of his hustle schemes, or the guy that plays the son of the shoe shop salesman who he's trying to partner with, and he has to convince him to get his father's money to make ping pong balls that are orange. All this sort of stuff. There's these great characters who just sort of pop up for a couple scenes, and or sometimes even less, and just leave such a lasting impression on us. That all said, it sort of feels like this might go in line with maybe the best picture director editing route of who wins this. So because of that, I have it in the dark horse. But like, once again, kind of like you, there's a question mark at the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, this will be a really interesting one to look back on. Like, what did the first casting award go to?
Yeah, it feels like we're going to need at least about 5 years worth of data before we can kind of see what trends emerge.
Yeah.
All right, let's move over to cinematography, and that's Darius Kanji, who is a legendary cinematographer. You said you had some big thoughts about this category last film we talked about, so I'm gonna cede the floor to you, and I want to hear what were your thoughts.
Oh gosh. Well, that's already so long ago. I don't remember what state of mind I was in when I was saying that. Uh, no, I think I mean I was just talking about in Frankenstein. You know, I'm Frankenstein being the only movie in this category that like I had to be reminded that in fact it was a beautiful movie. Marty Supreme, like I close my eyes and I can see shots from Marty Supreme very easily. I think this is like it is a beautiful movie in a really like grimy way. And it's very it's very visually memorable, if nothing else. That's what I can say about basically every one of these movies. But like this one for me, I don't have it as my I don't have it as the front runner, but I think that depending on sort of what they're looking for this year in cinematography, this could this actually might be higher than what I have it. I have it as a dark horse. Like I think that depending on what we're going for in cinematography, like this could be the choice because I think it's like a really it's really good at well, I mean, as you were saying with Frankenstein, actually, I mean, you were giving Frankenstein as a sort of a bad example, but I think here the cinematography and really goes a long way towards communicating, what Marty's going through at every given point. It's very stressful. It's shot really stressfully, like not quite the same kind of tense as Uncut Gems, but very similar. And I think that you get a lot of like characterization just through the way this movie is shot, and beyond that, it's very memorably shot. Like I feel like every day I either see the picture of like the shot of Marty running down the street on something, or I just if it's a day where I haven't seen that yet, I quickly envision it in my head really quick because it's just such a good shot. So there are a lot of really good shots in this. There's a lot of like every part of this movie has like its own little visual identity that is really that's very memorable, and it communicates a lot. It communicates very well just through the images on screen. What is going through the minds of all these different characters? Like I think to a much smaller scene where he visits Gwyneth Paltrow in the theater, and like just the way that scene is shot, like it's it's a very big area, but it still feels kind of claustrophobic and dingy. Like you within a second of just seeing that shot, you see immediately that like this is a washed up actress who is just not ever probably going to get another chance at glory, and she's trying really hard. And you see that in the first couple of in the first minute, and then throughout the rest of that scene, it's just like compounded to the point where that scene is telling you everything that's in Gwyneth Paltrow's heart and what she could possibly see in Marty, and how that is like, both how there's both like kind of an attraction there, but also you know, he's also like emblematic of what is keeping her in that room. And that's like a 5-minute scene, and that's all communicated just through the way that looks. I mean, there's a lot that happens in that scene too, but if you put that scene on mute, you would still see exactly what's going on inside those characters' lives. It's really good
Yeah.
cinematography, really really
Yeah,
good.
I agree. I think maybe in a different year, this would be something that would probably be more in contention, more in the front runner status. Um, but it's such a stacked category this year. I crapped on Frankenstein earlier. That's the only one I don't really care for. That said, I think Marty Supreme, unfortunately, maybe is a long shot in this, just because it's got such an uphill battle of who it's up against.
The thing is, everything I just said about Marty Supreme and pointing out that one single scene, I could also do that for One Battle After Another in Cynics. And whether I could or not for Train Dreams, we'll get there.
Yeah, I agree. It is a very well crafted film, very well shot. It just unfortunately seems like it's not the year for this film in this category, which is a bit of a shame because it is so beautiful.
Mm.
All right, let's move over to the best production design, and similarly, kind of with the cinematography, there's quite a few things that like really stick out in terms of memorable sets. I think of both the shot and the set of the I think it's the British Open tournament that he plays in early in the film, where we've got this, single solitary ping pong table that's lit beautifully, and then the whole crowd, the stands are mostly in darkness where you can't really tell, but it's there just enough that you can make out the shape that it's a packed crowd, and that's a great set. I really love
Mhm.
that. And there's so many other, bits, whether it's, his mother's apartment in New York City, which just feels so specific of that era, or the different other scenes that he has, or when he goes over to Japan and has his tournament, not the tournament, when he has his rematch over there, and all this sort of stuff. There's some fantastic set design in this, and that I really love, and frankly wish that it was considered more in this category. Unfortunately, I kind of feel like it's kind of straddling the line of dark horse to long shot. But yeah, I really love it, and wish it was getting more attention.
Yeah, I can agree with Dark Horse and Long Shot. I loved the production design in this. Everything you just said. I mean, I would just echo that. Um, but yeah, there are. I guess like there's maybe flashier production design. I'm trying to think. I think the flashiest production design here is Frankenstein, But if it weren't to go to Frankenstein, even then, I don't think Marty Supreme would be the front runner
Mm.
because, there's some very impressive production design on the other ones here too. I think that it's a strong category. That's what it is. But Marty Supreme, I really loved it. But I have it as dark horse, and like you said, dark horse, the long shot. I think I would agree with that.
Yeah. All right, let's go to best editing. Um, I often equate editing with tension and pacing, and I think this film does a great job with editing. It's so hard for us lay people to know what has good editing when it isn't flashy. Um, but this, I think, sort of does have a bit of flashy editing, which I think is easy to appreciate. Unfortunately, it sort of feels like this category is going to go along with the front runners for Best Picture, and so for that, I have it as a long shot.
Yeah, I have it as a dark horse because I agree with what you're saying about with what you're saying about editing, and I think that like when a movie feels as stressful as Uncut Gems or Marty Supreme, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, but a big thing is the editing. So I think that like this, maybe in a different year, this would be the front runner. However, uh, this year Sinners came out, and Sinners is like a masterpiece of editing. So, there's it's up against Sinners, and even if it didn't go to Sinners, I still once again I still don't think Marty Supreme would totally be the front runner, but maybe. So I guess I do have it as a dark horse.
Nice, fair. And then we've got one category left, and that is Best Costume Design. I love the costumes in this. This takes place. Is it between World War One and World War Two,
No,
or is it post World War Two?
post World War II. I think
Okay,
it's
post World War.
about almost 10 years after World War II. I think.
Right, 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 right. Takes place in the mid-50s. That's
Mhm.
right. Um, yeah, I think these are great costumes, but they are also very workmanlike, as in they are not flashy at all. Um, we get a lot of period accurate suits and dresses, and they all look great. And if they didn't have these costumes, that really helps set this story of when this takes place. I think more than just about anything in this film, especially because a lot of this movie is a little anachronistic in terms of the way they speak and the music that is used.
Mhm.
And so the costumes, I think, really helps ground the setting of when it takes place. Unfortunately, it's we mentioned Frankenstein as being the front runner for this category, and the Academy really, prefers its, Elizabethan era period dramas where there are, big, huge, flowy dresses with hoop skirts and over the top tuxedos and things like that. And this film just doesn't have that, unfortunately. A lot of these films in this category don't have that, with the exception of Frankenstein.
Yeah, I put it as a long shot. If it were not to go to one of the costume movies, then maybe this one could have a shot. But the thing is, well, actually, all of the other ones in this category are costume movies, so it's really hard to it, it's really hard to see it winning here. Although I think for the reasons you pointed out, I think this does have excellent costume design to really ground it in that time period.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. I have it as a long shot as well, which is a bit of a shame because I really like the movies that use their costumes to really tell a story, and this film utilizes that to a great degree.
Mhm.
All right. Well, of these 9 nominations, I unfortunately really only see it as a one-win film. I don't really see how, other than Chalamet, this picks up any awards. Are you in the same boat, or do you think it can maybe pick up a couple extra awards?
I would be in the same boat, but I'm going to make the bold prediction today that it is going to win casting. And I'm
Oh,
probably going to eat my words there, but I want to be different. So I'm going to say that I see it winning 2 awards for sure, with potential for many more. I think that this one has a high ceiling. Like, I think it could go, I don't think there's any world where it wins all 9, but like, I think it's like 2 for sure. And then, with Frankenstein, we were saying between 2 and 3, With this one, maybe as many as like I could see it going as high as like 4 or 5.
Nice. Okay. All right. Wow. I'm glad we diverged on opinion there, and I'm excited to see sort of where this goes.
But, maybe it wins nothing and I look a fool, but whatever.
Yeah, yeah, that could very well be the case too. All right, let's move over to The Secret Agent, which I apologize in advance if I'm butchering this name. Specifically to Bill Anthony, who always sends me messages correcting me on my pronunciation. My Portuguese is awful, so directed by Kleber Mendoca Filho. I don't know how if I did good or not, but I'm sure I'll get a comment about it from some people.
I think it's a soft C, but I also don't want to say it
Mendoza?
because I will get those. I'll get those comments too.
Kleber Mendoza Filho. I'm gonna say it like that, and that sounded better coming out of my mouth, so let's go with that.
I just watched a movie earlier today where he says his name many, many times, so you'd think I would know it, but nope, that part has left my head.
Mhm. In 1977, a technology expert flees from a mysterious past and returns to his hometown of Recife in search of peace. He soon realizes that the city is far from being the refuge he seeks. Now, this is very interesting because I originally saw this movie during TIFF. I walked out not liking it, but I was well aware that I was not in the optimal position to enjoy it or get it. I was sitting front row, way off against the aisle, and trying to read subtitles at an angle like that is difficult at the best of times. And it was kind of, I think, near the back half of my time at TIFF and was absolutely exhausted while I was watching this movie to the point where I know I missed some stuff that was happening. I walked out very confused about why it was called The Secret Agent, who some of these characters were, what the connection was, all this sort of stuff. So I knew, despite the fact that I walked out with a bad opinion on this film, that I had to rewatch it to truly inform my opinion on it. So I recently rewatched it. And then yesterday, you and I were chatting the day before we're recording this, and you said you were going to rewatch this as well. So I'm curious, what was your impetus to rewatching? Was it just because it was been a long time since you've seen it, or was it that you were hoping to maybe catch some stuff that you might have missed on the first time, or what was it? Why did you want to rewatch this film?
Yeah, I mean, definitely a bit of both. I also watched it at TIFF, and I think, I think I was in a much better state of mind than you just described when I watched it the first time. But I was also like, I was watching it with a friend who, I was watching most of those TIFF movies alone. So, when I watch one with a friend, it's like I brought him to a TIFF movie. It really has to be good because like this reflects on me if it doesn't. I also had like just met I won't shout out his name exactly just in case, but I had also just met a very famous producer who was sitting right next to me, so I was very stressed. I was like, I have to like this movie at the exact right amount as both of the people next to me so that I can impress one of them and talk effectively to the other one. And also, uh, it is a very, I think this is maybe, is this the right word? It's like probably the most cerebral of the best picture nominees. It's like, it's very strange. It's a very
Mm-hmm.
strange movie. And so it's already like a lot to take in. It's also in Portuguese, which is a language I do not speak, about a time in Brazilian history, which I am only very recently getting even a little bit acquainted with. But one of the things that I'm realizing is like the biggest thing about like one of the biggest um themes about movies in the biggest theme in one of the biggest themes in movies about that period in Brazilian history is that like a lot of that period of history is just fully erased. So it's a so they're very difficult stories to tell, and when you can tell them, they're necessarily missing so many pieces so that like if you're not 100% locked in, it is very, very easy to miss stuff. And I think that all of those different factors together, even if I was in a better headspace than being very tired at the end of TIFF the first time I watched it, I clearly missed a lot. And I went out knowing that I knowing that it was better knowing that it was better than how I was feeling about it at the time. Like, I walked out, you know, knowing that I had to rewatch it eventually, and so the other day I did sit down and rewatched it, and it really helped because I could pay a lot closer attention, and I'd already seen it once, so I, like, kind of knew the places where I had questions, and, it has been a few months, and we're gonna talk about it soon on my podcast, so, I just needed to see it again anyway.
Mhm. That's fair. Yeah, and I think the one other thing I had going for me was I watched, Philo's last film, Baccarat, uh, and I hated it. Absolutely hated it. I thought it was trite and annoying and dumb and a bad ripoff of The Most Dangerous Game that, I'd seen many times before and very confused by the reception it had gotten. And so I
So
went in.
you didn't watch his last film then, you watched his film from, before his
Oh,
last
he had another one before that? Oh, after that? Okay.
Yeah, he had a film called Pictures of Ghosts, which is a documentary, which I guess I'll talk about in a minute, but I felt was very, very much in conversation with this film.
Oh, I'm looking at it now. It sounds like it's basically a documentary version of what takes place in this film.
There's one scene where he's just like talking about a projectionist in Recife, and I'm like, oh my god, he just took this character and made and like cast an actor to play him in The Secret Agent. This is just him, right down to the name. The guy's name is Mr. Alexander. Pretty sure that's his name in The Secret Agent too.
It is. Yep, yep. Okay, and then all that to say, I really enjoyed the rewatch of this film. I thought it was excellent. It immediately jumped up in my rankings of the Best Picture nominees. It's just outside of my tier of absolutely loved it, into my grouping of like really, really, really liked it. So yeah, this is probably the movie that has jumped the highest in my estimations this year of from original watch to now.
Mhm.
So I will say all that.
Yeah, I'm
But
I'm gonna mostly agree with that. Anyway, you were saying.
next, let's get into this category. We've been talking lots and we got two movies left to do. Best Picture. I love that this got nominated here. This is a very inspired pick by the Academy. I love that it made its way out of the international category, which is one that we will talk about. All that said, unfortunately, this is just happy to be there because I think a lot of voters are probably going to have an experience probably similar to my first watching, not necessarily the angle entireness level that I was at, but the confusion aspect. This is not a simple movie. I watched this movie with my wife, who this was her first watch. And at one point we had paused it. I don't know, to take a bathroom break or get some snacks or something like that. I don't know what it was. And she was just like, I don't really know what's going on. Can you help me understand what's going on? So I kind of helped her recap the plot. I was like, okay, where's the sort of confusion going? And on the second watch, it made way more sense for me, obviously.
Mm.
But on a first time watch, it's so easy to get lost. You miss a couple lines and don't understand what the connection of who is this German character, and suddenly you're like, okay, and what was the point of that whole scene? I'm sorry, I'm lost. And what's the point of the leg? I don't know. So unfortunately, because of all that, I really do feel like this is just happy to be there. This is probably ninth or 10th place, depending on, your where you rank F1 in terms of all of this, in terms of likelihood to win, which is a bit of a shame because this is a fantastic film. It might suffer from covering similar subject matter in terms of the era as I'm Still Here last year. And that was a very straightforward film. And I wonder if that's going to hurt this film's voters going against it.
Yeah. I think I mostly agree with what you're saying there. I also would say that this is just happy to be here, to be there. But I think I said this maybe. I remember saying these words like 2 years ago on the episode we did with American Fiction. Can I just say I'm just happy that it's here? because
Yes.
like I first off, I really liked this, but also I think that like this movie being here, I don't think it would be here if there weren't 10 nominees. Um,
Mhm.
and I think that this is a really good case for why there should be 10 nominees. Not just that it should be nominated for Best Picture, but like this is the weirdest of the nominees. I don't know if I'm using that word correctly, but I want to say I like I said earlier, I think it's the most cerebral, by which I mean it's like there's there's a lot going on in this movie that is not straightforward. It's not an experimental film, but of the movies that are nominated, I would put it as like the most experimental in a lot of what it tries to do. And also, it is an international film, and like those are not categories of film that like you expect to see win Best Picture. And a big part of the reason you don't expect to see stuff that is more, and maybe I'll just say out there, just to not use the word experimental. Maybe the reason that you don't see as many movies that are just more out there or that are international as Best Picture winners is because they haven't really had a chance in the past. And so I think it's slow going because we have had, what, 10 years of 10 nominees at this point? Maybe 5 years? Like it's taking a while to get there, but I think that this is evidence of like the Academy slowly warming up to the Academy tastes changing in a direction I consider more positive, which is, movies like this that push the art form in interesting ways and aren't American.
Mhm.
Not that if Sinners wins Best Picture, it's not that Sinners is not pushing the art form forward. It definitely is. But like, it is cool that this year, Sinners could get nominated, and Marty Supreme could get nominated, and One Battle After Another could get nominated, and The Secret Agent could get nominated, all of which are doing very different things. And The Secret Agent, being one that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see in this lineup. But the fact that it is means that, that to me is evidence of changing tastes in a way that I find very good. Whether I would agree with them or not, I think that an international, very strange movie being in Best Picture is a good thing. I did like The Secret Agent, but even if I didn't, I would say the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We're still sort of living in a post-Parasite world for the Oscars where, yes, we're getting more international film representation within the Best Picture lineup, but, like, it's gonna have to be a juggernaut like Parasite again for an international film to be a winner. Now, maybe in 5 to 10 years where we're getting, 2 to 3 international films nominated in this category each year, then tides might change. We're gonna be able to look back and be like, "Oh, yes, here is the upward trajectory that we've been able to go from Parasite to whatever the next, non-English language film winner is, or whatever, ones that are more win competitive."
Mm.
But yeah, at this point, it very much is all of those things that you said that are unfortunately knocks against it, even though for us, those are positives for it.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move over to Best Actor, and that is Wagner Moura. He's sort of in a little bit of the Stellan Skarsgård camp, where obviously Stellan Skarsgård, been around for a much longer period of time, been in way more Hollywood films, even like including stuff like Marvel films, where the layperson knows who he is. Wagner Moura is known to English speaking audiences, between his work in Civil War and then in Narcos, which was, while that was mostly in Spanish, there was English in that film and was a big Netflix hit that is, kind of a crossover hit to the English audience. He is a well-known commodity compared to maybe, I look at someone like, in sentimental value, Inga Ibsdottir Lilius, who is not known to English language audiences,
Mm.
stuff like that. So because of that, that is a bit of a benefit for him. Unfortunately, I still kind of have him as a long shot. We've got Timothy that we talked about, who seems to be the far and away front runner. We've got Leo, who, also has put in one of the best performances of his career, and Michael B. Jordan as well, putting in dual work. He sort of slots in my opinion, just after the three of them.
I would also put him there. I put him as long shot, and it's the same calculus as you just put together. I think it is. I think it is always notable when someone from a non-English language film makes it into one of these acting categories, and that is the same here. Um, but like he's in the American award show up against three American powerhouse actors. Four actually, just that Ethan Hawke has not been doesn't have the momentum behind him that those other three do. You know, I I see him as I see it as possible if somehow none of the three front runners were to make it. Like I guess I see a path there, but I think he's you know, I think it's cool he got nominated. I'm only not saying just happy to be there because I think that like between him and Ethan Hawke, I think he would win that matchup.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe in a weaker year, he would be a little bit more competitive. This also sort of feels like the type of performance that would get recognized by the Academy in like the 60s and 70s when they did a better job of nominating and rewarding international cinema.
Yeah, and I mean it's well, I'm just thinking. I guess maybe kind of an aside. He did win Best Actor at Cannes, which isn't nothing, and I think it has been playing into his campaign. But again, it's well, like you said, maybe in a different academy had he been nominated.
Or if this movie came out in 5 years from now or something like that.
Exactly, and I guess in either case, in a different academy.
Exactly, exactly. All right, well, let's move over to best casting. We spent a lot of time talking about the casting of Marty Supreme. This was, I had originally done my notes for this before I rewatched it, and sort of forgetting the amount of great minor characters in this film, from his, conclave of people that he's hiding out with, headlined by this elderly woman named Donna Sebastian, who basically is sort of keeping all of these refugee people that they call themselves, of people who are sort of fleeing the government and need sort of like witness protection, but through their community. Amazing group of people. And then of course you have the villains as well, which are all so memorable in this film. I think it does a great job with the casting. Unfortunately, I think because this is not an English-speaking film, this is just happy to be there. But I personally rank this very highly.
I agree. I think it is. What did I write it down for? I wrote it down in casting as a long shot. Um, because I mean, honestly, I could write anything for casting. I don't understand this category yet. But what I do like is a lot of basically all of the stuff that I said that I liked about the Marty Supreme casting is also stuff that I liked about the casting of The Secret Agent. Like you just said, all those memorable side characters. I think too, like the assassin that finally comes in at the end, after all of this time, this entire movie spent being very, very deliberate and sort of like secretive about how they're going to get him. They just hire an assassin who goes around and kills like five guys who are completely unrelated to him, and then someone else shoots him down. Like kind of hilarious. And I love all these little bit parts that they have. You know, to me, when I was rewatching this movie, I was like, the extras in this are kind of like Marty Supreme extras. So
Mhm.
what I gotta say that I do really like about the best casting category in general is that without knowing exactly what the Academy looks for in terms for a winner, at least what they look for in nominees seems to be the same thing that I like in casting. So, I think that The Secret Agent is more evidence of that. So I think that's sick. I think that's really good.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%, yeah. Um, in a perfect world, it would be a 1-2 between Marty Supreme and The Secret Agent, but it sort of seems like that might not be the case.
We'll
I know
see.
you feel a little
We'll
bit
see.
differently, but that's me. Yeah, yeah. All right, let's wrap up The Secret Agent with the best international feature film. This is coming from Brazil. A lot of times the nominees are not they're submitted by countries who help produce the film, not necessarily where the film takes place or is about. But this is one of the cases where this is from Brazil, and this was their pick. They made the right choice this year. Obviously, I'm not super familiar with all the great films that Brazil might have produced last year, but I'm very confident in saying that they probably picked the right one here, in terms of both prestige and win competitiveness. I think this year's category for international film, I've only seen 4 of the 5 films, is stacked. This is always probably one of my favorite categories at the Oscars because they nominate some of the best films. And I made the joke last week on the episode with Sentimental Value was you used to be able to tell who is going to win Best International Film by the one film that maybe has a nomination outside of the category, like a lone cinematography or score nomination or maybe an acting nomination. But 4 of the 5 films in this category have nominations outside of the international film category, which is absolutely fantastic, which sort of shows the growth the Academy has made in terms of expanding who the voter base is, changing up who is voting, more people watching non-English films. All that stuff is terrific in my opinion. All that said, Sentimental Value is the juggernaut of this category. I have The Secret Agent as a very, very strong number 2 dark horse. But unfortunately, I feel like it's a pretty big front runner it has to overcome.
Yeah, I see everything you're saying. Personally, I do have The Secret Agent as a front runner. I am just learning now, and I won't speak too authoritatively on it because I'm interested in doing more reading that I should have done beforehand. This apparently had a very tough road to even getting nominated, to getting submitted, because the Brazilian Oscars process has been somewhat controversial. I'll say I don't know the extent of that. That is what I am planning to read right after we wrap up this podcast. But I think that the support this movie has behind it, I think that's going to push it to. I think that pushes it to front runner status for me. I see sentimental value there because sentimental value is a juggernaut, but I think that make my perception is not perfect. But when I've seen promotion for sentimental value, it focuses a lot on those other awards. Secret Agent is when I have seen promotion for Secret Agent, it focuses all in on that best international, and it's not splitting its focus too much. I think that like the what I have perceived as the campaigning for this movie is very focused in this category, and I think that will help push it over the edge in this category. It might end up not having anything else, but like sentimental value very much might have other things where I don't think
Yeah.
this is as important to I don't think this category is as important to the sentimental value campaign as the other ones. And again, my perception's not perfect. I'm working off of hearsay and like secondhand information. I'm not an expert, but I think that I would put Secret Agent as a front runner in this category specifically.
I totally hear where you're coming from. I think for me, I look at it as sentimental value is not going to get the votes for Best Picture, and so I think a lot of people that love this film are going to go, I'm gonna vote for something that maybe has a better chance to win, whether they believe that to be One Battle or Sinners, and then maybe put their combined strength behind sentimental value winning international, of being like, okay, this is the consolation prize that we're giving you because I'm not voting for you for Best Picture, so I'm going to vote for you in international. But I totally see where you're coming from as well, and from what I am seeing as well, I agree with you that it sort of seems like sentimental value is pushing, Stellan Skarsgård specifically as the one to kind of get the win there, and that's sort of where they're trying to put most of their energy. Whereas the Secret Agent realizes that its most competitive category is the international category, so that's why they're shifting their focus to that.
Mhm.
But if Secret Agent does win this category, I'm not going to complain. I love sentimental value. I have it ranked higher in my own personal rankings, but like I'm not going to be upset or offended if the Secret Agent wins here.
There's nothing in this category that I dislike. There's one movie that is not super fresh in my mind, and I got to rewatch it. But even that, I remember being excellent, and it was just an accident. But all the other movies in here I really loved. So frankly, I wouldn't be sad about any of these winning. But I think that the Secret Agent, I would be very happy if the Secret Agent won this.
Yeah, yeah. All this to say, I feel like I have a podcast in me basically just ranting about the international category and all the rule changes that I would personally do, but I feel like we've been going on long enough that none of that matters today. But know that I have strong opinions on this category.
Oh well, if you do that, let me know. I would love to at the very least hear your rant, perhaps rant with you.
You would be a perfect person to talk about it if I ever did that, of course. All right. So all that said, it's got the 4 nominations here. I have it at 0 wins, unfortunately, which is a bit of a shame. It just doesn't have the power behind it to, I think, get any wins. I think its best shot is international, but I don't think it's going to win there. Do you have this as sort of a soft one, or do you think it's going to be a locked in one?
I'm gonna embarrass myself more here. I'm gonna make a very firm. I have it at a hard one. I do think it's gonna get international, and once again, maybe come Oscar day, maybe I am revealed as a fool.
And then I realized I didn't say who the nominees specifically were. The only person I didn't mention was for best casting. The casting director was Gabriel Dominguez. So I just wanted to give him his due there. All right, let us move on to our last film, and that is Train Dreams, directed by Clint Bentley.
I've seen a grizzly big as a house walk across an open plain. Heard of a boy called Elvis something. His voice could drive young girls insane. I've seen a man from a mile away shoot a bobcat through the brain. But lately I've been having dreams, crazy dreams I can't explain. A woman standing in a field of flowers and a screaming locomotive train. Crazy dreams that go on for hours, and I can't begin to tell you how that feels.
Based on Des Johnson's beloved novella, Train Dreams is the moving portrait of Robert Grenier, a logging and railroad worker who leads a life of unexpected depth and beauty in the rapidly changing America of the early 20th century. I absolutely adore this movie. This is so beautiful, so haunting. There's so many great things going on in this that we're going to talk about the nominations. It does have 4 nominations, them being Best Picture, Best Adapted Screenplay by Clint Bentley and Greg Quaidar, Best Cinematography for Adolfo Veloso, and Best Original Song, Train Dreams, performed by Nick Cave and written by Nick Cave and Bryce Dessner. What were your thoughts on Train Dreams? I know what your thoughts are. Like I said, I just listened to your excellent podcast about it, but please tell me what were your thoughts on it so our listeners can hear here.
So I will redirect people to my previous episode on Train Dreams, because in that episode, I had just rewatched Train Dreams, so it's much fresher in my mind. It is now a few weeks back, but I do remember this is a movie that I also watched twice. The first time I watched it, I did like it, but I think I watched it not in the best circumstances. I watched it like on my second screen on a computer, and even when I am locked in on that second screen, there's the first screen that's still a little bit distracting. So the second time I like put everything aside, put it on the TV, and just like rewatched it again. And I really loved this movie the second time. I think this is another case. This is actually another case, kind of like Frankenstein, where I think from the original story, they hone in on 1 or 2 elements and really go for it. Because I've read bits and pieces of the original story. I do recommend the audiobook, which is narrated by Will Patton, who also narrates the movie. So it's familiar if you've already seen the movie. But it's very short, and there's a lot in the audio in the book that is not, at the very least, not made explicit in the movie. And then there are some things that are quite a bit that are changed quite a bit. And I think that thematically you end up with a very different story in the novella than they adapted to the screen, but like in an interesting way, not in a way that I think it betrays the source material or anything. I think that the source material sort of characterizes Robert Grainier's passivity as a much more despicable thing than the movie does. Because in both, I think that a big element of Robert Grainier's personality is how passive he is. Like, life kind of happens to him, and in a way that life kind of happens to all of us. So this is a very, it's a movie that really resonates. But in the movie, I think it's more of the movie to me comes across more as about that passage of time and looking inward about his own passivity, versus in the book, I think that a lot of that passivity is specifically called out, even within the text of the book, as a refusal to act rather than, there's a lot of points in the movie where he's just sort of taken aback and doesn't have a chance to act fast enough. In the book, he like maybe actively chooses to remain passive in places where he might not have otherwise. And I think it's really interesting how it adapts that story, because with very minor changes. This is actually something I liked quite a bit about Begonia as well, though I won't talk about it too much. We did just have a make remake style episode about that, if people are interested. But Begonia has it's got the same themes as Save the Green Planet, but takes them in a very slightly different direction that ultimately ends up with a very different movie. And I think that's kind of similar to what Train Dreams does. The novella is its own thing, the movie is its own thing. They start from the same events and thematically take them just slightly differently, to where you end up with uh, very different interpretations of the same themes, which I think is very, very interesting. And I'll stop there because I did talk about it for like an hour with Victoria, and you should listen to that because we had a great discussion about it.
I agree. People should go and listen to that. There was a great discussion you had. So this film is nominated for 4 awards, including Best Picture, Best Adapted Screenplay. Oh, I already said all these nominations. I don't know why I'm repeating myself here. I got so worried because I screwed up for The Secret Agent. But yeah, let's talk about its odds to win Best Picture. Like I said, love this film. It was so moving. I thought the performances were all great in this. Also could have been a contender for Best Casting. Unfortunately, between it having 4 nominations, which, is tied with 4 films for having the least amount, and the fact that it doesn't show up in some of the other categories, that we didn't get a Joel Edgerton Best Actor or William H. Macy Supporting Actor or editing, or I don't know, a few other ones that could have picked up casting, really I think hurts its odds to win. I think this is kind of firmly in the just happy to be there category, in my opinion, kind of with The Secret Agent and F1 as being sort of the bottom of the pack.
Yeah, I think that every year there's at least one like much smaller indie movie that does manage to sneak into Best Picture. Sometimes it's, sometimes the movie that I would classify as that is not actually sneaking in there at all. It's something like Nomadland, which I think is a similarly small indie movie that somehow got so much momentum behind it and ended up becoming the Best Picture, similar with Coda. But Train Dreams, I think, I wasn't necessarily expecting it here, but I know that it was very popular with a lot of critics and audiences that did see it. And I'm not totally surprised to see it here, but I think it's probably like number 10. I think it's very near the bottom in terms of actual chances to win. I do think it's, just happy to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is a shame for sure. All right, let's talk about the Best Adapted Screenplay. You had made a joke when you were recording your episode that you had started to listen to the audiobook, but you're only 2 chapters in. I'm curious, have you gotten any further since then?
Not much, not much further. I I am very busy, and I wish I was less busy, and more importantly, I wish I would actually make time to do things like listen to a 2-hour audiobook. It's not long.
Yeah.
It is not a long book.
Yeah, that isn't long at all. You could easily bang that out in a day or so.
We've been talking for 2 hours. If I hadn't been doing this podcast, I could have finished Train Dreams.
That's very true. That all said, where do you have Train Dreams within the category best adapted screenplay?
I think I have it as a long shot. I don't think it's likely. I think there are more likely winners here, but it is a interesting. Like I think it is a very interesting adaptation, and like if people when people see Train Dreams, one of the first thing, not the movie, but just when they see that name there, one of the first things that like you learn about it is that it is based on a novella. So like people are aware of this as an adapted screenplay, and I think and I think that when you watch it, one, it's very easy to at least get the audiobook, and it's very short, so people actually can read this. I don't know how much that actually plays into this here, but also it's like I think make what am I trying to say here? I think like maybe the screenplay for this one is kind of front and center because it is like a narrated movie. So I don't know how much is on the page that you don't see in the movie, but like it kind of feels like you see the screen. It kind of feels like it's just all there. So I think this is a very screenplay forward movie. Maybe I'm talking nonsense, but I think it's I have it as a long shot. It's not the front runner there, but I think it does have a path to victory. Also,
I agree with you in the sense of that it does feel like a screenplay heavy film. It very much feels like it's adapted from a book. You get that feeling like that's lifted directly from page to screen with the narration, with the way the structure of it goes, with the sort of minimal dialogue aspects of it, where you really sort of feel like you're inside the head of Robert here. All that said, I have it as a long shot. This is a tough category for sure. There's 2 very big films in this category. And then I think by virtue of the fact of Frankenstein being a classic adaptation is going to get some love. But I have this in the long shot, probably in the number 4 range.
yeah. I mean, I was just saying I don't know how much it matters to voters to actually read the thing that it is adapted from, or to, in the case of, I guess, Bugonia, watch the movie that it's adapted from. But I do think that Frankenstein being based on a novel that everyone's read, if I was a voter and if I was a voter who didn't watch the movies, which is already something I would hope never to be, uh, I would look at this and go, oh, Frankenstein, I know that book. Let's check that one off. So, the the recognizability of the source material does help.
Yeah, I agree with you there. All right, let's move on to the next category, which is best cinematography. And this sort of seems like a very interesting category because, if you walk away asking people what was the standout, aspect of Train Dreams, a majority of people are going to say the gorgeous cinematography in this film. This is a movie that takes place in nature in the early part of the 20th century, very rural. It takes place in the Pacific Northwest, which is already just sort of, naturally stunning landscapes. And they really do a great job capturing it. It uses mostly natural light. We get a lot of stuff with like fire, candlelight, things like that just looks gorgeous on screen. And then you have these tall, beautiful trees. Yes, some of the trees that are being cut down were CGI'd due to safety reasons and for the fact of not wanting to cut down trees that they didn't need to cut down. But it all looks absolutely stunning. Everything about this, I mentioned earlier, can you pick a frame and hang that up on your wall? This is the movie this year, and specifically from this category, where it's like, pick a random spot in the movie and you've got yourself a beautiful piece of art that you can hang up.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with all of that. I have this as a co front runner. I wrote down co in front of front runner here in this category, and the reason for that is that I think that Marty Supreme, One Battle After Another, and Sinners are all very strong, and they're very strong. Like, there's good cinematography there, but it's also a lot of like small areas, inside buildings. There's they're taking place in very uh populated environments. And it's great cinematography for that, but it is very different than in Train Dreams, where a lot of it is like beautiful vistas and like the forest. So to me, I actually see best cinematography as like Train Dreams versus everything else, not because Train Dreams is necessarily the like powerhouse here, but because I see it kind of as I see this kind of as like, what does the Academy want more? Do they want like do they want like great cinematography that like in populated environments that tells like a story about those characters' inner lives through a bunch of people on screen, or do they want that what I more classically associate with great cinematography? Not that this is right or wrong, but just what I think of more when someone asks me what is good cinematography, where I'm thinking of like beautiful sunsets and nature and landscapes and stuff like that. In that case, uh, that's obviously the Train Dreams category. The other one is the other three that will fight over it. So I see this as a front runner, depending on where the Academy's tastes lie. Essentially, I see it as like they pick one category or the other, and this is in a category all its own. If that makes sense.
I completely agree with you. It sort of feels like you've got the bigger high profile pick with Sinners, and then you have the artsy, more inspired pick with Train Dreams. And not that Sinners has bad cinematography, it has beautiful cinematography, but it sort of feels like do you want the popular option or do you want the secretly right option? And it sort of depends which way voters are going to go. In a just world, I think Train Dreams will win this. Not to say that if Sinners wins, it will be a huge travesty or a crazy upset, because it's also very deserving. But yeah, I'm very much in the same boat as you, where it sort of feels like it's co-front runners, and like it's one of those things where you're like, I hope the Academy does the cool thing and gives it to Train Dreams.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. And obviously, as you can tell from what I'm talking about right now in cinematography, I'm Marty Supreme. I'm Team Marty Supreme for this one. But I uh, in all seriousness, I think it has a good. This is the one where it has the best shot, and I would not be sad to see it win for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, we got one category left here, and that is Best Original Song. Ah, man, this is obviously the year of K-pop Demon Hunters. This is the year of gold, and it's the same as when Natu Natu came out from RRR. It is absolutely inescapable. It became the front runner basically the second the movie came out. Um, and that's a damn shame for basically every other song in this category. And I say that because I Lied to You from Sinners is terrific, but I love this song. This song is just so beautiful. I think Nick Cave has such a fantastic voice. He's a great writer. Bryce Dessner is from the band The National, also a band that writes terrific songs. And the two of them together have crafted something truly beautiful. But it is so understated, so quiet and intimate that it would never win this category in a million years, despite the fact that I love it so much. I have it in third place as a very long shot, but that's only because personally I believe the other two songs are just so far away from winning that it's third by default.
I really love all the nominees in this category this year. I think it's a really really strong year for best original song. And I hate this category this year. Like, I hate what the Academy's doing with it this year, because I don't know if everyone has heard, but at least at the time of recording, the current plan is that there will be two musical performances, or at least two performances of the original song nominees this year, one of which will be Golden and one of which will be I Lied to You. And to be fair, those are my favorite of like these nominees, but I think that is so brutally disrespectful to all three of the other nominees. which are fantastic songs this year, including Train Dreams. I would love to see that one performed at the Academy Awards. But like more so than any other category, the Academy seems to have just anointed one of those songs to be the winner and is throwing all three of the other ones just in the trash, which I think that is maybe the most shameful thing that the Academy could do in this category, aside from not having any of. Actually, it's. I think this is that's last year. I don't think they had any of them perform. I think that was more appropriate
Mm.
because, like, I mean, I don't think that's good. I think all of these. I think that if the Academy is doing any kind of, you know, any kind of performance outside of just people coming up and reading the awards, the first thing that should be is performances of the original songs, and to not perform any of them is bad. To perform only two of them is honestly, the Academy should be ashamed. I don't know why you would do that because it's like, okay, one of these two is going to win. Good work, Nicholas Pike and Nick Cave and Bryce Dessner and Diane Warren. See you next year, maybe or not. Who knows? I think it's. I was shocked when I saw the headline that they wanted to only do those two songs. I think it's very disrespectful, and it's especially bad to my guys Nick Cave and Bryce Dessner, who did write a very beautiful song for Train Dreams.
I am 100% with you on everything you just said there. I absolutely agree with all of that. And it's a shame we're not going to get to see this song in particular perform, but a huge disrespect to all of the nominees, especially with them so blatantly putting their thumb on the scale for what they believe to be the two frontrunners.
I have it as just happy to be there because after that, if that is the case and there is in fact only going to be two performances, well, those are going to be the winners. One of them will win.
Yeah.
So, it's great, but that means that the other three are just not going to happen. What I would love to see this year is for everybody, if there's any Academy voters hearing this, I would love to see for all the Academy voters to get together this year and award the best original song to Diane Warren out of protest that only two of these songs are being performed at the ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, you know what? Diane Warren wouldn't appreciate a protest vote. So if you do like Diane Warren's song, please only vote for it sincerely. If you want to vote in protest, though, I would recommend voting for either of the either of the three songs that are not going to be performed, because I think that is a decision that should blow up in the Academy's face. And I don't know what that would mean because honestly, I mean, by the time you get a decision that should blow up in someone's face, there is no good option here. Because Sweet Dreams of Joy is also a fantastic song from Viva Verdi. And it would be a damn shame for it to win out of spite because it is a fantastic song that probably does not have a chance, but that would be a very deserved win. And, my current thinking, the way that the type of conversation that I am trying to now desperately get myself out of, but have just presented here is, please make this decision that the Academy is doing, make it clear to them that it is a bad decision. And I don't know the best way to do that, but I really, really hope that the Academy will reconsider that. And if they don't reconsider it, I do hope they will never do it again.
Mm-hmm. That would be the dream. So to wrap up Train Dreams, I have it as 0 to 1 wins, with the only one it has a shot at is cinematography. Kind of sounds like you're in the same boat.
Yeah, I think 0 to 1. I think cinematography is its best shot. I kind of think everything else is not likely.
Yeah. Okay, well, that wraps up our very long discussion on these 4 films. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on. Again, as always, I appreciate your insights and our great conversations that we have.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me back. I always love talking. I always love talking about movies, just in general. So if anyone is listening to this and I have not been on your podcast, feel free to reach out. I love talking about movies. I'm happy to talk about whatever movie you'd like to talk about. But I think what's really nice about your podcast, Dakota, especially episodes like this, is there are very few times on my own podcast that I get to talk about 4 movies like this in such great detail. And, one result of that is that we end up with very, very, very long episodes like this one. But it's fun because, where else am I going to talk about both Frankenstein and the Secret Agent in one episode? So thank you for giving me that opportunity to go.
Very true. And where can people find more of your work, and what have you got going on?
Well, as I've mentioned several times on this episode already, I do have my own podcast, Classic Movies Live, which I do with my friend Pierre Frigon. We are currently going through the Best Picture nominees. We're almost done. We only have The Secret Agent left, which means everything we've talked about here, except obviously The Secret Agent, we do have an episode on, so you should check those out. We are probably going to take a quick Canadiana detour in our next episode. So if you are interested in Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie, we're going to have an episode on that coming out soon. And beyond that, I do write for Dakota's website, ContraZoomPod.com, where you can see some of my reviews. I believe the most recent one that went up is... Gosh, I don't even remember.
Good luck, have fun, don't die.
Oh yeah. Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die, which is a movie I really liked, and you can read about why in my review. Beyond that, I am going to be hosting an award show called The Deathies, which we mentioned very early on, but just to mention it one more time, the Academy of Death Racer Awards, those are going to be on March 14th. I believe the time we've set is 3 p.m. EST, and I will make sure that Dakota has the YouTube link for that, which so you can bookmark that and check that out the day before the Oscars if you need anything if you need anything to like lock in your final predictions. We actually do end up being relatively close to the actual winners more often than I would have expected. So, if you're looking to win your local Oscar pool, you should check out the Deathies, because we'll give you a good idea of where things stand.
100%. So I'll make sure to link to all that great stuff in the show notes. But this has been a That Shelf podcast. Visit thatshelf.com for more great film discourse. Follow the show on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at ContraZoomPod. How many wins do you think Frankenstein, Marty Supreme, The Secret Agent, and Train Dreams will get? Leave a comment on Spotify or send us an email. Thank you to Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music, and to Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. If you like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, we do post all episodes there as well. And if you really like the show, consider tipping us on coffee. Thanks for checking us out.